Still a couple of notable free agents on the board for the Toronto Blue Jays to sign, and I'm talking about Matt Chapman and Cody Bellinger, but spring training is just 10 days away, so we thought we would predict the Blue Jays lineup and what it could look like in 2024, so we'll have that on this episode of Jays Digest, as well as Yariel Rodriguez. His contract details have been explained, so we'll have that and much more coming up next. What's up, Jays fans? I'm your host, Peter Vryonis, alongside host Nick Gosse, and the baseball season is getting closer and closer. The Blue Jays play their first spring training game on February 24th. We're right there, folks, so stay tuned because we're almost in that time where we're going to see live baseball on our TVs every single day for about 6 months. So I love that time of year. Obviously, it sucks that football is over and basketball and hockey are kind of in the lulls of their season, but we get baseball soon, and I'm super excited for it. And Nick, I'm really excited to predict these lineups because it's truly not really set in stone, like where they're going to go. We don't know who's going to line up in which position. We don't know who's going to be hitting in which position in the order. Like there's just so much to be revealed as spring training goes along here. I think we have a general idea of what we may see throughout the season, but it's fluid. And the lineup that you see in game one is probably not the one that you'll see in game 162, but it's still very fun to predict nonetheless. And Nick, I'm really looking forward to seeing some baseball. I just can't wait, man.
Yeah, it's 10 days away finally for the first game of spring training. And like you said, we're going to do the lineup predictions now. These could change if they make a few more additions. But without further ado, quick reminder, hit the subscribe button. But I'm not going to harp on that too much. We're on the road to 12,000. Peter, let's get right into it. We did this last year. Our predictions were pretty accurate. And hopefully we can kind of predict well this season. So we're just going to have our kind of combined predictions here. And there is asterisks on one of them. But Peter, let's start with versus left-handed pitching, which is the one that's a bit more interesting, and then we'll get into the right-handed pitching as well. So we have Springer, and we have the positions there as well. Springer, Bichette, Guerrero, Turner, Schneider, Jansen/Kirk, IKF, Varsho, and Espinal. Now for the catchers, we kind of just combine the two because that literally changes on a game-to-game basis based on who's hot, based on who's pitching. So that kind of just depends. But Peter, the biggest thing here is, and you'll notice for both of these versus left and righties, the top four stays the same. So it's really from 5 to 9 that's interesting. And the biggest one here is, Espinal and IKF. But I'll let you take your thoughts on this lineup. Obviously, we came up with them together, and this is the one we both kind of agreed on. The interesting one here is Espinal. It might be some controversy there, but let's think here. What are your thoughts on this one, this lineup here against lefties?
I think another big question mark heading into the year is George Springer. Is he going to be the everyday leadoff hitter? Because he wasn't great last year. And obviously we know the track record, former World Series MVP, guy's legit. And he's been paid a lot of money to be one of the main guys in Toronto. So I think for the meantime, that's going to be his spot to lose. But yeah, Espinal, as long as he's on this roster, Nick, who do you play him against? And are you just going to waste a roster spot and not have him play? That's a big question mark, Like, why is he going to be occupying a roster spot if he's never going to get in game action? And the one thing he did do decently well last year was hit left-handed pitching and come up with some decent hits against lefties. So, his defense wasn't great last year, but I'm sure he'll have a bounce back because he knows his MLB career could be on the brink here if he doesn't step it up. So he's got to step it up in the defensive category over there. I'm sure he will this year. He's a very good defender. And if you're not going to play him ever, there's no point in having him on the roster. So I wouldn't say he'd start every game against left-handed pitching, but you want to get as many righties in your lineup as you can against lefties because we know how much the Blue Jays struggled. And one wrinkle I want to touch on here is Davis Schneider in left field because there's no set-in-stone fourth outfielder right now for the Toronto Blue Jays as it stands. So Davis Schneider figures to play a lot of left field. Maybe even some third base every now and then. He's going to be that kind of utility guy who just mashes for the Blue Jays, and I'm looking forward to it. What do you make of him in left field?
Yeah, I've seen some, if you listen to Ben Nicholson Smith podcast and a few reports there, you're kind of right on. They said he's most likely going to be playing a good bit of outfield. Obviously, who knows how good of an outfielder he is. We haven't seen too much of that at all. But I think that it
We
makes
saw it a bit
a
last
little
year. We,
bit.
we saw it a couple of times last year. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think Schneider will be a very key part to this team, and you'll see we have him in both of the lineups. And quickly on Espinal, I was thinking I didn't think that Espinal would really make the cut for the roster, but it's kind of a good point. I think it won't be every single time, obviously against left-handed pitching, because there is a time where Kiermaier will be playing. They'll play both Versho and Kiermaier to go for defense or whatever. But there's a good chance that Espinal gets the first nod because you mentioned it. If they do keep him and they don't trade him again, this could change if they get that fourth outfielder spot. This would obviously replace Espinal, then you move everyone around. But, I mean, I like it. I don't mind this at all. You have IKF there as well where, again, you'll see against the right-handed one, which we'll get into in a second, we don't have him in there, but that doesn't mean that this isn't every single game. This is kind of just what the optimized positions will be. What do you make of, before we move on to the other side, what do you make of IKF there at third base against left-handed pitching? I know you've been kind of having Biggio over him most of the time, obviously against righties as well, which you'll see in a second. But I don't mind this lineup now that I look at it. But again, relying on a lot of bounce backs and Schneider playing left field is something that I don't think will happen every single time against lefties. But I think if he starts to play a serviceable left field, I think Schneider could easily get in there almost every game against lefties because hopefully his hitting will translate the same way as it did last year.
The thing is, you just want to have that versatility and you want to give yourself as many options as possible. We know the mainstays in the lineup are going to be Springer, Bichette, Guerrero, and most likely Justin Turner. And then and one of the catchers, of course, and then everything else is fluid. Like you just don't know what you're going to get from these guys on a daily basis. You got to roll with whoever's hot. Let's say Espinal is riding an 8-9 game hitting streak. He might get the nod against a righty as opposed to Biggio, who's been struggling as of late. So it's very unpredictable. We've been saying this throughout the course of our past few videos here. We don't know how these players are going to perform, and sometimes you just kind of force your way into the lineup, and that was true last year with Davis Schneider, who started in the seventh hole and then was batting cleanup, batting third, batting leadoff. He was doing a bit of everything because he's just forcing the hand of John Schneider. So you might just see that throughout the season and someone just runs with a specific position. But I think this is probably the best lineup you can get against a lefty.
Yeah, I agree. And let's quickly move on to the righties. I mean, the top four are the same. The big difference here is the Kiermaier and Biggio thing. You have Biggio replacing IKF. You have Kiermaier sliding in there with Versho. Again, we kind of just went over the big analysis here for both of the sides. I think a lot of the things we said stay the same. I guess the only debate now among fans and us would be third base, whether that's IKF or Biggio. I think Biggio definitely gets the nod to start. And I was looking at a website's projected right-handed pitching after we made this, and it's actually the same as ours. I think the order might be slightly different, but it's around the same hitting lineup there with Biggio at third. They seem very high on Biggio. He finished the second half of the season last year with like a 400-plus OBP on base percentage. I think this is the lineup that they're going to be running out, and actually looks very good, especially if you get some bounce backs from Versho and if you have Biggio sustaining the second half. So any quick thoughts on this before we move on? Because it's pretty similar to left-handed, but you get Biggio in there, and of course Kevin Kiermaier as well with the elite defense, which is why he might slide in against left-handed pitching some games as well, just because of his defense. Maybe even instead of Versho on a lot of days, who knows?
Yeah, so for the majority of the MLB season, you're probably going to see right-handed pitching on most nights, and that lineup that we see over there, I like it. I like it a lot. I think that's a very good lineup, and you go up and down, 1 through 9 there, not many holes. Not many holes. The way Biggio was performing at the end of last year, I really think he's going to run with that number 5 spot in the order, especially against right-handed pitching. Davis Schneider, I want to see what he can do on an everyday basis. And look, I think he's earned that opportunity. Jorge Soler spotting over there. He's not going to be in the lineup. Don't get too excited. But Davis Schneider, I want to see what he can do with everyday reps because I believe he earned it with his performance last year. And if he struggles, if he's not what you maybe thought he was, then maybe you can go in a different direction and give IKF, give Espinal a few more at-bats. But I love the ceiling of a Davis Schneider full season at the plate, and I really think he can be a valuable contributor here. I think he's going to be great in this lineup. I think he's going to hit 20-plus home runs, drive in 65-plus men, and he's just going to do a great job in there, and I'm very excited to see what he can do. 1 through 9 there. I'm really liking that lineup, and that's the one that we're going to see on most nights, most likely.
Yeah, and I'm hoping they give Schneider the chance to run away with the role. They didn't really last season like they did for a bit, and then they had him playing in and out, and how much that can affect someone. So let us know what you would change. Leave in the comments your own 1 to 9s for righties and lefties. I'm curious to see how much it shakes up. Maybe we'll see some more IKFs versus right-handed pitching, maybe even less David Schneider. So very curious to see. Again, this is super hard to predict, harder than last year because, well, A, we don't know if they're completely done yet regarding the fourth outfielder spot, but B, it's just a lot of players who can play in different positions. So let us know your thoughts are on that, and it's a fun activity to do before every season. Now, Peter, we have some interesting details on Yariel's contract. It came out today, and let's just jump right into it. So the first one here are the full notes. It's a 4-year contract with a 5th-year player option at $6 million. If declined by the player, the club has a $10 million team option. He has some bonuses. No promise of MLB roster spot, I'm told, but pen over AAA, meaning that it's most likely we're not going to see Yariel in AAA very much, if at all. They'd rather have him in the pen, which is a big development. And then we also have this, which came out, and his $32 million 5-year contract allows the Blue Jays to option him without his approval this season only, which is an inclusion that demonstrates the need for flexibility with him, which is actually very big. A lot of players who come from these different leagues don't give the team the option to option him without approval. So what are your thoughts on this now that we got the full kind of contract here? It's a bit more expensive than some may have thought, but I mean, I don't mind it. And we, if things go well, we have a team option or I guess a player option if he declines it. So a lot of ways to go here. A bit of a confusing contract, but I'm happy with it overall, I think.
Yeah, right now I think his skill set is better suited to be a reliever because he didn't pitch last season besides the World Baseball Classic. So it's going to take a while to ramp up his innings and his workload. I think he's going to be a solid arm in the pen. His stuff is really good. He's got a nasty slider. He's got a decent fastball that gets an okay amount of swing and miss, which can touch up to 97, 98 miles an hour. So he's got the stuff to be a back-end reliever, and with the departure of Jordan Hicks, I think that's maybe the role that we'll see him in early on if his arm is ready and if he's ready to handle that workload out of spring training. But I wouldn't rule out the possibility of him being a starter and then maybe ramping him up to be that sort of swingman that Ross Stripling was. But his value right now for this team, considering the depth that they have in the starting rotation, is probably going to be as a reliever, and I'm good with that.
Yeah, I agree. You can also read the first kind of thing there. He says he will be stretched out as a starter, but how much work he can handle this year is uncertain because he didn't pitch after the World Baseball Classic. So I think their long-term goal is a starter, and a lot of it depends on how Alek Manoah will pitch this year because there's still a lot of uncertainty there. And even after this season, we have a lot of guys whose contracts are beginning to end. Kikuchi's obviously ends. But any quick final thoughts before we wrap up? Getting very, very close to baseball, which I think is good. And I still think the Jays have one more move left in them, but any final thoughts here?
Again, Nick, I'm just super excited. I'm going to watch every spring training game that I can. I'm going to listen on the radio when it's not available. I'm
That
just
time
a
of year.
freak for baseball. And I want it. I want it every single day, and I cannot wait. It's the best time of year, in my opinion, just having Blue Jays baseball on the TV when you get home from work and school and whatnot. Whatever you're doing during the day, you can guarantee yourself a Blue Jays baseball game at the end of it, and that's the best part of it for me. So enjoy this team. Enjoy the players that are on it right now. I do agree that there's maybe one more move in there that Ross Atkins could scrape from the bottom of the barrel, but as this team stands right now, I think they're going to be a lot more competitive than people are giving them credit for. And again, it's baseball at the end of the day. We don't know what's going to happen. So hang in there. It's going to be a long season. Got to go through the ebbs and flows as these players do, and I'm sure we'll do that. We'll have our down moments. We'll have our up moments, but I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah,
Can't wait.
And we'll have you covered every step of the way. Let us know what your thoughts are on all this. If you want to check out our video from yesterday, click on your screen now. And we'll see you tomorrow, which is one step closer to the first spring training game.